I want to tell you a quick story. In my days before I was a jovial tree hugger, I was a bored and kind of pessimistic teenager. I lived pretty far away from my school, so every day at like 7 in the morning, I had to take this hour-long bus ride just to get there. And every afternoon I had to do the same journey again to get home. Looking back, I had 10 uninterrupted hours a week where I could have done anything. You know, read books, listened to podcasts, studied for my GCSEs, or even, God forbid, just been present. Yet, for the most part, I did none of these things. In fact, my routine was usually the same. The second I sat down on that bus, I would put in my headphones, listen to sad, emotional songs, and stare out of the window, pretending that I was in some melancholy music video. It's funny reminiscing on it now, just how seriously I took myself. But it also really makes me think about this core idea that just crops up all the time in Buddhism, which is how our thoughts shape our reality. To quote the Dvaravitaka Sutta, whatever one frequently thinks and ponders upon, that will become the inclination of one's mind. Combining this with the understanding of just how profoundly music can influence our thoughts and emotions, a rather unsettling conclusion begins to emerge, and with it, questions. Why was I listening to such melancholy music in the first place? Just how much damage was it doing to my mental health, thought patterns, and self-image? And does listening to this sad music technically qualify as a sort of psychological and/or spiritual self-harm? Well, before we can answer any of these questions, let me just clarify something. This is not some robotic self-improvement channel where we think that emotions are inherently bad and that art has no purpose or place in our lives. I do think that there is a time and place for emotional, dramatic, and even sad music, where listening to it can genuinely add colour to our lives. For example, when mourning a loved one and putting on a song that reminds you of them, or on the other side of things, listening to that new Sufjan Stevens record, because you heard it was the best album of last year. However, I think where the problem truly lies is when this type of music becomes the default, when the majority of the songs we listen to on a daily basis are just these emotional, introspective ballads. Because do you want to know the funniest thing about that story I just told? Most days when I stepped onto that bus, I wouldn't even be in that bad of a mood. You know, this wasn't a case of some deeply depressed kid who used music to help ease the pain, to find some catharsis, who just wanted to relate to someone else who was going through the same immense struggles as him. No. In fact, most of the time when I stepped onto that bus, I would be feeling pretty neutral, pretty indifferent. My mind would be in its most malleable, persuadable state, and looking back, I would just choose to pollute it. I would actually make the conscious decision to send depressing sonic vibrations into my brain, instead of positive and/or relaxing ones. And I think this is something that so many of us do. It's a real thing, especially among young people, and speaking from experience as someone who used to listen to melancholy music all the time, I don't think it's good for you. You know that saying, you are the average of the 5 people you spend the most time with? Well, I think this can also be applied to the media we consume. Not only does this sad, melodramatic, self-centered music make us, well, sad, melodramatic, and self-centered, but constant, repeated exposure can lead to an increased comfort with these negative emotions. And yes, we can sit here and talk about Buddhism and how our thoughts shape our reality and self-identity, but this idea is also supported by simple neuroscience, which teaches how sad music affects the brain's reward system, reinforcing negative neural pathways and making it harder to maintain positive emotions over time, which then, of course, creates this feedback loop where the music is making you feel worse, which in turn makes you seek out more sad music just to feel comfortable, and before you know it, it's become your identity. You feel completely at home, just wallowing in these sedentary, self-pitying mental states which you should have never really stepped into in the first place. So if this is the case, why do we listen to sad music at all? Well, again, speaking from experience, I think in a weird way it can feel kind of good to indulge in melancholy. Victor Hugo went as far as to call melancholy the happiness of being sad. And I'll admit, a strange kind of comfort can be found in these somber mental spaces. After all, they are states of inaction and passivity, which require little effort and offer an immediate emotional release. feeding our ego and reinforcing our self-image. It doesn't matter that these emotions are harmful and that our self-image is a negative one. The validation we receive from sad music is, well, validating. This isn't even mentioning how depression and melancholy are so often romanticized, everywhere from art to social media. There seems to be this dangerously false belief that in order to be deep or interesting or cool or beautiful or creative or intelligent or different or profound, you have to be this lonely, pessimistic, tortured artist who no one else understands, who spends hours a day wallowing in melancholy, listening to melodramatic music and pondering on just how complicated you are. And sure, this option can provide a brief sense of comfort, while shirking the responsibilities you have to yourself and others. It is quicker, easier, more seductive. But in reality, it is just another classic example of instant gratification, providing immediate, short-term emotional relief, but harming you, your self-image, and the people around you in the long run. So, what's the solution to all of this? Well, first of all, it's not a question of taste in music, you know? I'm not gonna sit here and say that in order to be happy, you need to be listening to Bob Marley and the Grateful Dead and the Beatles. Although, come on man, Yellow Submarine, it's a classic. But what I am saying is that we cannot let these depressing songs and the negative mental states they produce become the default. We cannot allow these melancholy, self-pitying habits, as cathartic and comfortable as they may feel in the moment, get in the way of our long-lasting happiness. I understand the emotional attachment one can have towards music. There's a reason it's called the universal language. But as great as music is, it just does not come close to the importance of our mental health, thought patterns, and self-image. I guess if this video is about one thing, it is the idea that we have the power to influence our own minds with the decisions we make on a day-to-day basis, and that nothing will change until we do. Take it from me, okay? I have been the tortured artist who embraced the cool, mysterious vibrations of melancholia, who devoured depressing art, who listened to sad, emotional music while staring out of the window like he was in a music video, who wanted everyone to know just how much he blamed the world and everyone around him for his oh-so-profound angst, and who in reality was just harming himself and probably really annoying and boring everyone around him. I have also been the more positive, outward-looking, grateful, present, stoic student of life who learnt to let go of his self-centered, melancholy habits and in the process discovered that he himself had far more power over his mind than he realized. And trust me, I choose the second option every single time. I hope you can as well. And as always, be kind, be strong, be curious.